Colleagues and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank you once more for inviting me to share my thoughts on the topic titled From Budget to Action discussion. So this topic assumes that many of you have read the budget. The key question is, how do we put it in action? Is it the safe assumption? Okay. But I was also asked to talk about how does this budget support small and medium enterprises? How does this budget contribute towards the growth and development of small and medium enterprises? And SMMEs, they really play a major role in our economy. And according to the Department of Small Business and Development, SMMEs contribute between 52 and 57% of the GDP and employment. The point that Kathy referred to, the question of employment. So if we support SMMEs, we will make a huge contribution in dealing with unemployment. Initially, I thought I would talk about how this budget at a macro economic policy level and micro economic policy levels and programs contribute towards building SMMEs. So because of time, I'll just talk about the macro. And maybe during the discussions, are we going to have questions? Okay, I must find out from the president, Pella. I'll just talk about the macro and say a few things about what we're doing with the electricity situation, what we're doing with the transport logistics, and what business opportunities are there in so far as these industries that we are opening. So the macroeconomic policy stance that we have taken is that it is important for us, in order to grow this economy, to have a macroeconomic framework that supports low and stable inflation and predictable exchange rates. And why are these important? In life, we all want stability and predictability. You don't want tomorrow, just as a consumer, as a household, that the price of bread is 20 Rand today, tomorrow it's 100 Rand, the other day, the price is just unstable. You can't plan. Similarly, if you're in business, it's the same thing. You want stability, you want predictability, and of course, low inflation doesn't mean that prices do not go up. They do, but they must go up at a reasonable level, at a predictable level, unlike in other jurisdictions that I should not mention for fear of breaking diplomatic protocols, that you've got prices moving up and down and money losing value. It's very difficult to operate in that environment. Whether you're a SMME or big business, you can't operate in that environment. You interact with the rest of the world. You buy things from the world, you sell things to the world, and you use your national currency. And if it's unstable and all that, it's very difficult for you to basically plan. So it's important, therefore, and that's why in this budget, we've said that we really need to have a macroeconomic policy framework that supports low and stable prices and predictable exchange rates for the reasons that I've just mentioned now. The second issue, we said it's important for us to deal with the public debt. Our debt to put it in numbers, is 5 trillion. It's very big. Now, maybe before I come to how, like action now, how we are addressing this public debt, there's nothing wrong in having any debt. The question is, can you pay it? The context of the public debt is the economy growing at the rate at which the sovereign can pay that debt. And if the economy is not growing to service that debt, you're getting into trouble. The second thing, you're borrowing for what? Are you borrowing for consumption or for investment? So we said, look, we really have to put our debt on sustainable level. Because if your debt is not sustainable, you're gonna fail to pay your obligations. Even paying for health, education, which is very important in supporting the youth to get into different careers, which is very important also to support SMMEs through grants and affordable loans. So we said we've got to do something about this debt. And part of dealing with this debt, we said we've got to cut on certain expenditure because it doesn't make sense for you to continue spending and yet the revenue is going down. So we said there are certain areas where we've got to cut, and we are cutting. But there are certain areas where we're going to increase expenditure on the labor-intensive departments. The police, to enable us to deal with crime, GBV and femicide, to enable us, because crime has become an economic issue. The infrastructure is being destroyed day and night, and it affects our ability to grow our economy, and thus setting the necessary conditions to deal with unemployment as well as poverty. So, GIFREC, which is Gold Foreign and Exchange Reserve Account. And as Prof was saying, that account, we've got 500 billion rands. So we said, okay, let's take part of it towards the debt, 150 billion towards the debt. For the reasons that we've got to put our debt on sustainable levels. And if you reduce your debt, you're also reducing the debt service costs. Because our debt service costs now, we're spending 320 billion rands per year on debt service costs. It's a budget which is bigger than education or health. So can you imagine if that amount, we were using it to basically sort out education, health, and so on and so on. And of course, we accumulated this debt precisely because, and we admit, we're the first ones to admit that the state-owned entities were badly managed, and we kept on recapitalizing them, including SAA, which is in the news now. And with this deal collapsing, I don't know the details behind that, but we're hoping that at least we found a solution to reduce the dependence of state-owned entities on the fiscus. And I must also say that the growth of this debt, and I'm not trying to be political against this party which has been formed somewhere in KZN, this debt got accumulated in that period, during the state capture period. That is when it grew. That is where it really grew in a significant way. So all what we're doing, we're basically trying to deal with the legacy of the state capture as well. So this debt cannot, its accumulation, its growth, cannot be delinked from that period of state capture. So we're trying to clean ourselves, to sort ourselves. We're reforming, we're renewing ourselves. And in that renewal, because renewal is like any other reform that you take. And reforms, whether it's in the economy, it upsets certain interests. It upsets certain rents. And some people are going to fight back. So we're not surprised why some people, like the former president, and not your president, of the ANC has decided to form his own thing, which we're challenging, by the way, in terms of the name. He can use any other name, but not Umkhonto Wesizwe. So this debt, we said, we can't use, because some people were saying, no, take that, the entire amount to consumption, it's election year. We said, no, we're responsible. We don't want to be like apartheid, which in the late 80s accumulated debt, the debt stock increased significantly, and the ANC government inherited a debt. We said, look, we've got to be responsible. Just because we want to win votes, we can't just go on a spending spree. We need to be responsible. So let's take part of this 500 billion towards servicing this debt. So let me quickly move towards what we're doing about, because like I said, at some point I was going to talk about what we're doing about paying our SMMEs on time, because that's one of the issues. We're not doing very well as government in paying SMMEs on time, because in terms of the law, we're supposed to pay SMMEs within 30 days, and we spend almost 1 trillion as government procuring goods and services from entrepreneurs, but we don't pay them within the prescribed time. And there's huge consequences for failure to pay SMMEs on time. Late payments generate cash flow problems, which also make it difficult for SMMEs to honor their financial obligations, strained relations with suppliers and other people within the system in which you operate. And you are forced to borrow to meet sometimes your contractual obligations. And debt is not for free. You've got to pay interest. So there are huge consequences in this regard. And as at the end, for failure, that action by that bureaucrat to do the payment on time means that we're undermining the economic growth and expansion opportunities, because you can't invest as a small business in new equipment, your resources are depleted. You can't even invest in marketing to grow your business and so on, because you are not basically paid on time. So we know what the problems are insofar as the government's inability to pay on time. This includes corruption, let's face it. There's someone, I won't mention his or her name so that I don't reveal the gender. This fellow, he was in the supply chain. They wanted to promote him. He said, no, grand. Little did we know that that position enables him to generate good rents. He sits there. For him to fast-track your payment and all that, you've got to pay. So we got surprised. Hey man, this guy, we're all human beings. We've got a material interest in growing in companies, in government. But this chap, I never understood why until it was revealed by the entrepreneurs themselves. Because I think this corruption is not only government doing it, there are people outside who are working together with these officials who perpetuate the culture, basically. So we really have to do something ourselves as SMMEs to deal decisively with this culture. Systems that we have, some of them are archaic, and I would really, really appeal that ABASA, please do join government. Let government be your employer of choice. There is no way in which government will be fixed by you shouting from outside. You've got to come in and fight. It's not always easy, but you've got to come in and fight. Because if we don't fix government, we don't fix the state, all of us are going to suffer. Criminals will take over these institutions, repurpose them for other things, as we see in other metros and municipalities. I won't mention them, you know them. And I don't deny that even in my own party, there are people who are criminals because this is a big movement, but it can only be fixed by credible people like you, professionals who come in. You can join whatever party you want. Of course, I'll speak for that come to the ANC in your numbers for all sorts of reasons. Because if professionals are not politically involved, this liberation that we get today that we're enjoying, it was professionals, the founders of the ANC. Piklika Seme studied Columbia University, Mandela, there were lawyers, Ruth First, and so on and so on. It was professionals who said, in as much as we, in fact, under apartheid, it was impossible for them to pursue their careers, they had to say, let's fix this system because we should be like, a rabbit. I grew up in a countryside. Rabbit, when it goes to get water, drink water in the river, it does analyze the environment. I don't know, dogs or hunters or lions and all that. And when it has analyzed the environment properly, it goes in to drink the water. So you can't be a professional who's narrowly focusing on the professional. It's important for you to focus on your profession, but be concerned about what's happening around you. Get involved. Do something about this. Be an active citizen. Get involved, sort out issues, speak out, protest, and so on and so on. Because where there's no struggle, there's no progress. And struggles come about because there's individuals get involved in organizations and fight. So I would really appeal that even this corruption, our inability to pay on time, we've got to sort these things. We can't sort them just through putting systems, important as they are, but we also want active citizens who will impose this culture of ethical behavior in our own state system. I want to talk about electricity, what we're doing on energy. But one thing I really, really appreciate that we've basically done was to liberalize the energy sector. That the monopoly of Eskom must come to an end, and is coming to an end. Because this we've seen, it has generated huge systemic risks. We spend so much time in fixing Eskom instead of fixing the energy problem, because the two are not the same. So we said, let's allow the private sector to also participate in the generation of energy. And there's a lot of energy that has been generated, particularly solar energy, by the private sector. The Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, Western Cape. And the key issue is how to get that energy into the grid. And And we need almost 14,000 kilometer transmission infrastructure to get that energy onto the grid, because our energy source was coal, largely concentrated in Mpumalanga. So the transmission network had no relationship with the Northern Cape, which is generating a lot of energy for us after the liberalization of the energy sector. We're going to need a lot of money to invest in the transmission infrastructure. There's different figures that are being thrown around. Some say 300 billion, some say 350 billion. I said, I wish that debt service cost could be channeled towards this kind of infrastructure. Will be mitigating and dealing with the problem of energy that we have. But what we've also said is that it's important to reduce the cost of investment in energy for households as well as businesses. And it's for this reason that we've reduced the tax liability for businesses that invest in solar, for households that invest in solar. And we've also put together energy bounce back loan guarantee scheme to support SMMEs that are facing, of course, many of them are facing the challenge of energy, but SMMEs that are interested in investing in solar energy in this period we are going through. And your readers, I can't read on your behalf, all that information, it's on our website, and we expect you to shed light to more people who are either ignorant of this support that we're providing to SMMEs, or some people who are very knowledgeable, but they can't read, they can't write, particularly English, but they're very bright in terms of ideas. So we expect you to partner with those people in the township, in rural areas who are unemployed, but they've got ideas on how they can deal with unemployment. You know, it's so, to Kathy's point, you know, township, okay, I also partly grew up in Thokoza, so I'm a son of a migrant worker. My father had a house here, Limpopo, you know, the migrant workers system. So I grew up in Thokoza, Mkwai Street as well. When we were growing up, weekends, townships, during the week, when we're coming back from schools, there will be very few people. But today, and on weekends, then you'll have a lot of people in the township. And that told you about the rate of unemployment. Today, you go to a township, during the week, weekend is the same. Young people, they're in corners, they are nyaupe, drugs. The 350 is just a temporary measure. It's like Jifreka. It's a temporary revenue measure. You need to grow your economy. That's the best way of dealing with your debt. That's why you need to support SMMEs. You've got to support businesses, create a conducive environment for businesses to invest in the economy, because you all know, Economics 101, GDP is the function C plus I, G, X minus M, and that I is about investment. And you cannot grow your economy without investing. And of course, you've got to export whatever you're producing, you've got to interact with the rest of the world. And that is why, again, we said Transnet can't be a monopoly. On the rail, we've got to liberalize, and we have, from the point of view of policy, that you need third-party access on the rail. It's like N1 to Limpopo. It's not only this bus company owned by Prasa that is on the road, city to city. You've got Greyhound and all that. But that road, yes, belongs to the state. We maintain it, we concession it. So why is not the same with rail? we should be saying those who can afford, let them come and transport goods on our rail infrastructure from here to Durban, the auto sector, the Ford, it's in Pretoria. They've got to get their manufactured cars to the ports. It's not functioning well. And Transnet, because it's a monopoly as well, inefficiencies are many, there's no competition. So we said we need to open up this in order for us to grow the economy. And we do all these issues to support SMMEs so that SMMEs, and for me, it's not a question of small business and big business. It's not the choice between big business and small businesses. It's about the articulation between the two. What is the connection between big business and small businesses? In the value chain, to what extent are big companies, take BMW as an example, they've got components. Who is supplying them? Those components. Because the growth of some of these countries, Southeast Asia, the Asian tigers as we know them, the chaebols, there was a nice articulation, these big companies, Samsungs of this world and all that, they had to say, in the value chain, how do we work with small businesses to make sure that the components that we need, the things that we need for us to grow this big conglomerate, we get them from the small businesses. So that partnership between big business and small business is one of the things that SMMEs need to place on the agenda of big business and say, we can't only say, government, we expect you to do the following things. Big business should also come to the party. And I worry in many instances when we go to NEDLEC, because this voice of small business is muted, if not absent. And we've got to think also about the institutional makeup of how we negotiate policies, debate policies in some of those platforms. Because, as I said, the voice of small business is almost absent. No one is putting an agenda and say, what about small businesses? Labor has a voice, big business has a voice, we've got a voice, community, which is an amorphous category, because all of us will belong to a community. Sonke belong to Sanko, political, all of us. So we really need also to think through, and I think ABASA, you've got a platform, you should bring brilliant ideas on some of these issues that we're facing.